Thank you guys for tuning in to the virtual candidate forums hosted by Teaching for the Culture. My name is Bianca Goolsby, and I'm the founder, and I'm here to say thank you for being here, for being engaged and being intentional with who is going to be in our school board seats. Our children deserve the best, and we want to make sure that you are operating and you're listening very closely to what these candidates have to say. Thank you guys so much for following us. Make sure that you take a look at our website, www.teachingfortheculture.com. In addition to that, follow us on social media at Teaching for the Culture. Just a couple of rules. I want you guys to relax, have fun, and also be intentional with what the candidates have to say. If you post your questions, we will screen it. And if we have enough time, we will make sure that those questions are addressed as well. Thank you to the community that have submitted questions to us, and we are excited to get started.
Good evening. I am Kimberly Skukulek. I am an educator for Pinellas County Schools, as well as the VP of Advocacy for Pinellas County Council PTA, and I will be your moderator tonight. Teaching for the Culture Candidate Forums follows a nonpartisan, unbiased, and impartial format. Time limits for all comments will be strictly enforced. In fairness to all candidates and the audience, we ask that these time limits be respected. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening remarks to introduce themselves. So that we can address as many questions as possible in the time available, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. If time permits, candidates will also have 2 minutes for closing statements. In fairness to all candidates, we will rotate the order of how these questions are answered. We will get started with the opening statements. We would also like to inform our viewers that we did invite Dr. Jackson, but she was unable to attend tonight. Caprice Edmond will be our first to start off with opening statements. Caprice?
Thank you very much for providing this opportunity for me to share my platform as well as my qualifications. I am a parent, a current educator, and an actively involved community member. Growing up here in Pinellas, in our district, I graduated from Gibbs High School and I attended USF St. Petersburg, where I earned a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's in elementary education, a master's in educational leadership, and a certification in infant family mental health. Some of the work that I've been doing for the past 18 years specifically relates to children in education, from providing respite care through PARC, working with youth in foster care, and now being an educator. I am committed to our children, our community, and our future, and my consistent history backs that up. I have I actually have a lot of priorities, but some of the things that I plan on focusing on is ensuring that we have equitable resources and investments, that we are addressing the needs of the whole child through whole child learning, increasing our family engagement and community partnership, as well as recruiting and retaining the best educators and support professionals, and ending the school to prison pipeline. Most of the work that I've done specifically relates to children in education, and what I've done in our community relates to education and children as well. So I look forward to bringing all of those skills and partnerships to our school board as I work to build a coalition that will better improve our schools and ensure that we have equity in education.
Thank you, Caprice. Corey Gibbons, you'll be next.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Bianca Goolsby, our moderator, and all of the candidates who have made the sacrifice to not only be here tonight, but to run for public office. I know it's not easy because I've made the sacrifice myself. Running for office can get lonely. So you have to remember your why. My mentor, the late Mama T. Lassiter, used to always say, know your why and stick to it. The reason why I'm running for school board is because I care about our students, I care about our teachers, and I care about the families of Pinellas County. As a product of the Pinellas County school system, I appreciate the opportunities that my public school education has allotted me. I believe in the dedication to and the funding of our public schools. As an educator, someone who's been in Pinellas County Schools on both sides of the desk, both as a teacher and a student, I recognize the needs of our students, and I can speak to those needs and address them on day one. You should vote for someone who's experienced, because experience does matter. Experience in our school system, experience in the business sector. My business acumen will bring a skill set that is much needed to the board. I have experience balancing a multi-million-dollar budget. I have experience managing a team of over a dozen individuals. The Pinellas County School Board budget is $1.5 million. We deal with over 10,000 employees and over 100,000 students. You need someone who knows not only how to communicate, but someone who knows how to relate. And if anyone knows what the students and the teachers of Pinellas County need, it's someone who's been there recently. Someone who recognizes that a good leader not only leads, but listens. That's what you'll get from Corey Givens Jr. I ask you to visit me online at www.coreygivens.com and join our movement, because that's what this is, a movement, not a campaign. It's an inclusive movement that's being powered by people just like you and me from all walks of life. I look forward to earning your vote, and I look forward to bringing new ideas and new solutions to Pinellas County schools.
Thank you, Corey. Next up, Carl Nurse.
Good evening. I first have to acknowledge that I am as old as my two opponents put together plus. For 40 years, I've been working on issues that matter to our community. I mean, I worked in the legislature for half a dozen years, including 4 years for the state senator that we elected, who had been the head of the Classroom Teachers Association, and obviously we worked on a lot of education issues. I've led lots of organizations, from the Planning Commission to KONA to my neighborhood association to the City Council. I served in the City Council for 10 years. I think probably the most important things that I did was to help turn around some neighborhoods. I forced the management change of the most dangerous public housing complex, which was right across the street from John Hopkins Middle School. I did a lot of work with Melrose, whether it was getting them sidewalks or getting them shirts or getting them supports or getting drug dealers away from them, or facilitating a dozen houses being rebuilt around the school. And in a larger sense, maybe the most important thing I got done was with Ken Welch. We established a CRA, a community redevelopment area that has $4 million a year currently, and it's guaranteed for another 26 years. That we can only use to turn around the inner city. I have funded the building of 25 affordable housing units from vacant lots, where I made not a nickel on any of it. I just donated the money. I have served on boards and led boards that have built another 80 houses. And so I have a long history of working on of issues that surround us, and when some people talk about their business experience, I've run a business that has 50 employees for 35 years.
Thank you to all of our candidates for those opening statements. Before we start talking about specific issues and discussions about District 7, let's establish a foundation on the roles and responsibilities of a school board member. A reminder that you will have 1 minute to answer each question. We will begin the first question with Corey. Corey, what do you believe is the role of a school board member?
You know, Florida is 43rd in student per capita expenditures, and we are 46th in teacher pay, excuse me. However, 52% of our education staff professionals make below minimum wage. That's a problem. The role of the school board member is to be a manager, to manage the superintendent, and then also to establish policies that the superintendent administers. So the superintendent and the school board play a role that acts in tandem. Our job is to work together to make sure that there are policies in place that support not only our students, but our personnel as well. And that goes for teachers and support staff. Everyone should feel respected. So our job is to work to make sure that that happens.
Thank you. Carl, same question. What do you believe is the role of a school board member?
school board member really has two very different roles. One is you have a megaphone to advocate for public education and improving public education. And you should not understate the power of that megaphone. And the other is that the school board passes the budget, which is essentially setting your priorities. It's $1.5 billion. There's 14,000 employees, 150 locations, some of them, almost all of them schools, some other specialized items. And so the school board does set the broad policy, but much of the policy is really spent by how do you spend the money. And that's where I have an edge over the other folks, because I worked for 10 years on the city council where we had about a $700 million budget. And I got to see the choices, and the first 4 of those years we were deep in a recession, which I fear we are going to stumble into now. And so it is critical that when money's tight, that you know how to find the money to use for the important stuff.
Thank you. Caprice, what do you believe is the role of a school board member?
Our school board members have an important job to represent the constituents in our district. Specifically in District 7, as a school board member, we need to make sure that we are taking our concerns from our community and sharing that with our colleagues on the school board, and ensuring that our policies are aligned with the needs of our students and families, as well as ensuring that our budget is aligned with our priorities. If we truly want to ensure 100% student success, we need to have everybody on board, which is why my plan includes both parents and community leaders, addressing the needs of the whole child, ensuring that we have equitable resources and funding for all schools, as well as recruitment and retention. And from the work that I've been doing with making policies and working with our legislators for the past 4 years, I know how to do this.
Thank you. Caprice, you will also be first on this next question. What unique skills would you bring to the board? Do you have a unique perspective that may be underrepresented or absent from the board today?
Thank you for asking that question, because I am the only person that's currently running with children attending our public schools. I am the only person that is a current educator. And through the work that I've been doing for the past 4 years through Florida Education Association, where I serve as the chair of the Teacher Program Policy Committee, the past chair of Florida Young Remarkable Educators, where we specifically worked on initiatives for recruiting and hiring new professionals, as well as some of the work that I've done in our community, from serving on the County Council PTA as the Grants and Patrons Chair, writing grants to increase family engagement, to being involved with other organizations like the NAACP, NCNW, and the list goes on of the coalition that I'm building, of the coalition that we need to ensure that all of our students are successful.
Thank you. Carl? Oh, excuse me. We'll actually go. Oh, you got it. You're good. You know the question?
It's sort of in the same spot. When I was on the city council, 2 of the 8 members represented frankly the poorest parts of town. And the challenge there was to get at least 3 other members of city council who represented far more affluent neighborhoods to be willing to invest in the neighborhoods that needed it the most. I had a long history of success in that. I passed several dozen initiatives while I was on council. And in almost all cases, it was an effort to bring additional resources to the areas where there was the greatest need. That is a skill that I frankly got better at as time went on, but I've been doing that on boards for decades. And so I think that's the particular skill. And then the asset that I have is I have decades of experience in tough budgeting, both in a business and in the city council situation. And I think you have to assume we're going to have tough budgeting. We have very limited ability to generate more money. And so what we have to do is find ways to spend it more efficiently.
Thank you. And Corey, how about you? What are your unique skills that you would be bringing to the board?
Thank you for that question, Kimberly. Well, first of all, let me begin by saying what I have that my opponents don't have is the energy, the experience, and the enthusiasm to get the job done on day one. When I walk into that office in Largo, I won't walk in there looking for my office like some other people will, but I'll know where my office is and I'll know how to get the job done. I bring a youthful perspective, and that's something that we're missing on our school board right now. We don't have anyone to speak to the issues of our students and our families, and that's exactly what I plan to do. I'm also a bridge builder, not a bridge destroyer. I know how to work across the aisle. I know how to build relationships and build a rapport to bring dollars back to our district. That's what I've been doing, whether it's Tallahassee or DC. I've been advocating and lobbying for our students. And lastly, I'm the only candidate in this race and the only person who would be on our school board that's bilingual. And that's important when you're thinking about the 20,000 Hispanic students in Pinellas County schools that have not been represented and have gone unspoken for many, many years. That's what I plan to do, represent all and not just some.
Thank you. So our next question comes from Teaching for the Culture. Carl, you will be first for this question. Identify the difference between equality and equity.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I have no idea what you said because your voice was not coming through.
Can you hear me?
I have no idea what you said I assume you asked the question, but I didn't hear anything.
Can you hear me now or no?
If you can hear me, if you'd repeat something, I'd be happy to respond to it.
So Carl, I'm not sure if you can hear me or not, but the question is to identify the difference between equality and equity. It's also in the chat if you're able to read that. Okay, we will move on. Corey, hopefully you can hear me. And we'll have you define that one and we'll come back to Carl. So
sure.
Do you need me to repeat the question or are you good?
If you don't mind, please.
Yeah. Identify the difference between equality and equity.
Thank you. Well, equality and equity are two terms that are often used interchangeably, but they differ in many different ways. An individual who's given different supports, they make it possible to achieve equality. Equality is typically defined as treating someone the same as if giving someone equal access to the same opportunities. So the playing field isn't necessarily always leveled. Meanwhile, equity refers to proportional representation, whether it's socioeconomic status, race, gender, or whatever. There are many different ways to separate these two, but what's most important is to recognize that there's more that unites us than what divides us, and we need equity in education. And the only way that we will truly achieve equity in education and make sure that every school is equal and every district is funded adequately is by making sure that we put the resources where they need to be. And that's in our neighborhood schools. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I believe we have Carl back. So Carl, I'm going to ask the question again. Identify the difference between equality and equity.
Well, equality would be if everybody had a 100-yard dash and had to run 100 yards. Equity recognizes that there are some kids who have to run 130 yards to win that 100-yard dash. And that's really what we have here. In this quarter of the county, we have 19 elementary schools where at least 40% of the kids are living in poverty. And so if you're hoping to get equal results, you're going to have to invest more heavily in the schools and the children who start 30 yards behind. And so to get equal results, you need to invest not equally, but you need to invest more heavily where the kids start off behind. And that's how you get to a good result.
Thank you. Caprice, your response, please. The definition and distinctions between equality and equity.
Equality is providing everyone with the same thing. Equity is providing students and schools with what they need, which is why I am proposing that we advocate for equitable funding for our students and for our schools. Currently working in the classroom, I see that we aren't really ensuring that we have equity in our schools. Many schools lack the resources that they need to provide the supports for our students and our families. And again, having that connection from currently being in our schools, I'm able to bring that information to our board.
Thank you. Caprice, you'll be first for this next question. What do you see as the district's greatest challenges, and how would you work to address them as a school board member?
The greatest challenge right now is reopening our schools, as well as trying to figure out the budget. I know that our district is applying for FEMA and CARES grants, and there will be additional money coming along, but we are going to have to make sure that our priorities match our values. And if we want to ensure that we are providing the best education for all students and having our schools reopen safely, we're going to have to find the money and invest in it. What I look forward to doing is looking at the budget, which will be the first workshop for our budget will occur next week on the 28th at 6:30. I've already reviewed what they plan on proposing, and I look forward to, hold on, buddy. And I look forward to going line item by line item, as well as listening to the monies they've been able to obtain.
Thank you. Corey, what do you see as the district's greatest challenge, and how would you address those challenges as a school board member?
Well, first of all, I have to agree with my opponent. I definitely believe it is the coronavirus pandemic that we're in the midst of. However, I do not believe that money solves all of our problems. As an educator, I believe that we have to pour all of our knowledge and our resources into making distance learning a robust alternative until we can resume in-person instruction. We've got some very tough decisions to make, and it's going to take someone who has experience mediating and negotiating. And right now, this is a management decision. And we need to make sure that we have someone at the helm who has a background and a track record at making tough decisions on behalf of their community. Education, as we know it, has changed due to the coronavirus. And we need to rethink the traditional classroom setting, but we also, most importantly, need to empower families with the option to make their own choice. We can't make the decision for families, but what we can do is consult with professionals who have the knowledge, because I'll be the first person to tell you, I don't have all the answers. I don't profess or pretend to be a know-it-all, but what I do have is a willingness to ask questions, and that's what I'll do.
Thank you. Carl, what do you see as the district's greatest challenge, and how would you work to address them as a school board member?
Our most immediate challenge, of course, is the COVID-19 situation. Our most significant long-term challenge is closing the gap with the students who are behind. For the COVID, I checked today, and about half of the parents so far have chosen distance learning. Now, ironically, the upside about that is if you have half as many students who actually come to school, your odds are a lot better of being able to create 6 feet between the students. So if we have half as many students who are doing bricks and mortar and half are doing distance learning, we may be able to safely open the schools. Now, we'll have to see where we are in 4 weeks. Things are changing every single day. We need to be prepared to adjust to that. the long-term challenge is really all about closing the gap for our students. That really involves doing work.
Thank you for that response, Carl. And I think we'll get into the achievement gap in some later questions. So Corey, you'll be first on this next one. It's well past time for the Florida education officials to re-examine and reinvigorate the 1994 infusion law to truly prioritize Black history and ethics studies for a new generation of students. If elected, what is your plan to ensure all students will receive Black history education as required by law?
Well, first of all, I think it's sad that we need a law to tell us or to mandate that we must teach Black history. Personally, I think it's long overdue. I'm a Black man living in America at a time where Black men are being gunned down. And we need to make sure that we are teaching our students, culturally relevant material. So I am a huge proponent of culturally relevant instruction and making sure that we are introducing our kids to material that they can relate to. Studies have proven that students learn better, and there's a higher success rate and graduation rate for students who see a reflection of themselves in front of the classroom. So we need to make sure that we're recruiting and retaining quality world-class educators who look like us to teach students that also look like us. You know, it's not a Black or a white thing. We're all human, but we must recognize that we must teach our students unbiased, unparalleled education to give them a whole, well-rounded, holistic experience. I'm a product of Pinellas County Schools. I went through the magnet programs, and it was very rare that I saw a Black teacher or read a book by a Black author. I want to change that.
Thank you. Carl, same question. If elected, what's your plan to ensure all students will receive Black history education as required by law?
Well, one of the things you work on is what books do you use, and the school board does get to periodically choose books, and one of the things you want to make sure is that the history books and the literature related books are inclusive, and obviously historically that has not been the case. Historically, history books were written by the folks that were in charge, and of course America is in a long journey. I happen to be an immigrant myself, and so I may have a slightly different perspective from some folks. But I do see that if you don't show the broad picture, you get a distorted view, and that's really what we've gotten over time. And so I would take the opportunities when we're choosing history books and literature to make sure that we have an inclusive look at this, so that all people get a well-rounded view of the world and our history and literature.
Thank you. And Caprice, do you want me to repeat that question for you, or are you good?
I'm good.
All right.
So currently we have our students petitioning for culturally relevant instruction and fuller context of history. As a current educator and equity champion for our district, I am providing that professional development to our educators. As a parent, I would like to see more diverse curriculum embedded within our embedded in our district, and I know how we can do it. Our district currently has equity champions. We currently have initiatives to promote culturally relevant instruction through professional development. What I would like to see is that professional development become mandatory. And again, this is from me having current experience, me having children currently in our schools, and me hearing from the community. What I look forward to bring into our school board is somebody that's dedicated and been doing this work.
Thank you. Our next question, we will begin with Carl. So Carl, how would you develop and maintain a relationship with the district to better understand teacher perspectives and what works best for students?
Well, I think it's really a matter of spending time at schools and talking to teachers and administrators and students. And I've done a moderate amount of that at Melrose and at Campbell Park, but I would have to do that at lots of other schools. And you just listen. There is a reason God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that was so that we would listen more. And that's frankly the way you learn. So it's just a matter going to where education's happening and listen. And when people know you're willing to listen, they'll tell you what's on their mind.
Thank you. Caprice, how would you develop and maintain a relationship with the district to better understand teacher perspectives and what works best for students?
As a current educator and actively involved union member, I will bridge that gap that we currently have between our staff, support our staff and our district. There seems to be a divide, a breakdown in communication, which is why we have some of the concerns that we're having today. Through my work with Florida Education Association, I know exactly how to build relationships with all people. And that's based on the coalition that I've been building. But specifically with educators and support professionals, I'm going to be in our schools. I'm going to be in our schools. I'm going to be in the community. And I'm going to bring that information back to my colleagues on the board. And I'm going to share that information with Dr. Grego and advocate on behalf of our support professionals, because I know how it feels to be a support professional as well as an educator from currently being involved in our schools.
Thank you. Corey, you're next. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. I'm a good listener, so I got that. And that's important to make sure that your leader listens. I not only talk the talk, but I walk the walk. I listen and I communicate. Effective communication skills begin with listening. I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing once I get elected to the school board, and that's being in my community. I've found, as a neighborhood association president and a PTA president, and also as a school teacher myself, that the real solutions are found at the ground level, not lobbying in Tallahassee or meeting at the school board office in Largo, but it's found talking to teachers. And I've had the opportunity to visit every school in District 7 and a majority of the schools across Pinellas County. And what I found from talking to not just the principals, but talking to the cafeteria ladies and the plant operators is that people want to feel respected and valued. People are tired of these folks sitting in their ivory tower up in Largo, coming down only when it's time for the budget. No, that's not what we need. We need to include people in the budget process. We need to include them when it's time for choice. We need to make sure that all voices are heard when they come to the table.
Thank you for that. And I think this next question will expand on some of all of your thoughts. We will start with Caprice, though. Share the work you've done or visits you've made to elementary, middle, and/or high schools in the community you plan to serve in the past year.
As a current educator and parent, I have had the opportunity of visiting Perkins Elementary, St. Pete High School, Tyrone, and many of the other schools that my children attend, as well as the children that I serve as a guardian ad litem for. Something that sets me apart is that although I haven't been able to visit every school, I've been working with educators and support professionals from many of the schools across our county, working on the working conditions that supports our students. And some of the work that I've been doing outside of my job through our community is advocating. I've been on the ground working behind the scenes to support our parents in education through the work from Pinellas County Council PTA, serving on the City of St. Petersburg Youth Development Grant Review Committee, serving on the Southside CRA. What I'd like to ask you to do before my time is up is that you fact check all of these candidates.
Thank you for that. Corey, you're next. Share the work that you've done, the schools that you've visited over the past year that are within your community.
I agree. Facts matter. And fact of the matter is, I have been involved in my community. I haven't been receiving a paycheck for what I've done, but I do it because I care. I don't have children in the school system currently, but that shouldn't be counted against me. I care about the future of Pinellas County and our schools. And I want to make sure that the schools that I send my children to one day are better than the schools that I attended when I was in Pinellas County schools. So I want to speak again to the work that I've done, because you want to make sure that your candidate has a track record of service, not just a resume. But I've worked as a PTA president at Lakewood Elementary and also John Hopkins. I've worked as a student government advisor at Lakewood High School. I have worked volunteering at Oak Grove Middle School as a big brother with big brothers and big sisters. So I've rolled up my sleeves, I've been in the trenches, and I've put in the work. And my track record of service proves that.
Thank you. Carl, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I got you. I should mention
All
that my sister has taught school for 40 years. And so for 40 years, I've had a sister talking to me about this. And yes, my children did go to the local schools. My youngest graduated from PC, at the PCCA program. The older two girls graduated from Northeast. My youngest went to Campbell Park, and also then to Riviera. I have primarily in the last year been around Melrose. That's the school that I concentrated on the most when I was on city council. 3 of the 5, what were originally called failure factories by the paper, were in Lakewood, Campbell Park, and Melrose were in my district. So those were the 3 schools that I interacted with the most. And Melrose in the last year primarily, that was the probably community school with a lot of wraparound services. I believe that'll be a model that we'll want to look at.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to the next question, we will begin with Corey. In 1 minute, please provide the community a snapshot of your first 90 days plan if you are elected.
Thank you very much. My opponent keeps referring to our schools in Pinellas County as failure factories. First of all, I want to point out that our schools are not failures. In fact, the system has failed our students, and I want to fix that system. Some people are running for office because they have nothing else to do and they just want to fix things. Well, I have a track record of fixing things. I have a track record of working with families in Pinellas County to find housing and schools. Or jobs. I've done it all, and I'm going to continue doing it. And so in the first 90 days, I'm going to continue what I've been doing, and that's intensifying community involvement, motivating parents and families to get involved with their students' education. And lastly, devising a plan to not just talk about closing our achievement gap and shutting down the school to prison pipeline, but actually doing it. My opponents have all been in education for 30 to 40, 50 years, and politics as well, but they have done nothing to raise the standard of living or better the quality of life for students south of Central. But I come to do that. I have new ideas and new solutions, and I'm going to innovate those plans to make sure that it happens.
Thank you for that. Carl, please take the next minute to provide the community with a snapshot of your first 90 days in office if elected.
Well, I think that's really going to be 2 areas. One, I'm going to have to get deeply involved in how is the reopening happening. I think how this will work, and to find out, are we able to safely open, and are we able to educate the kids who are not in bricks and mortar, and how do we make sure that we're serving all those children? So I think that will be one area, and the other is I have a long list of possible budget savings that I need to look at, and it ranges from setting up we have a $115 million health insurance bill. And when I was with the city of St. Pete, we set up a wellness clinic, which provided health care for the employees for less money and and better health care and save the school system money. There's dozens of those kinds of things that I think are possibilities. So I need to check out all of those as soon as I'm there.
Thank you. Same question to Caprice. You are on mute.
Would you please repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 1 minute, please provide the community a snapshot of your first 90 days plan if you are elected.
Thank you. My first 90-day plan would include establishing meeting dates throughout our district so I can continue to keep our community involved and let them know what's going on with our school board. I'd also make sure that I reach out to all of our principals, because I know that our principals, they need to be listened to as well. And from talking to our principals and our support professionals and educators, again, just bridging that gap, making sure I have relationships with the people working in the schools as well as the community. That's what I intend on doing during the first 90 days. I also plan on taking a deeper dive into the data. I've heard people speak about our graduation rates and our proficiency levels of our students. And I know that the data appears to be good, but I also know the rates of our students that are truly proficient, we have to really look at the amount of students that are truly proficient or graduating.
Thank you for that. Our next question, we will start off with Carl. What would you want to see in the superintendent's budget to address equity and ensure all children receive an equitable education?
Well, I think the weakest area currently is the schools that are struggling end up with a dramatic disproportional share of rookie teachers. And frankly, teaching is one of those things where you get better with time, hopefully. And so if we're going to have a lot of rookies in schools that need a lot more help, I want to make sure that we have a mentoring process. One of the reasons we have teacher shortage is that we have tremendous burnout in the first 5 years. And so if we could do a better job mentoring those teachers, so shorten their learning curve, we could have much less turnover. I mean, I saw that over and over again at Melrose, where they have a tough year and they replace the principal and most of the staff and start over again. And so I think that's the place to start. That will take some money, but it's not a massive amount of money, and there is a savings in reducing turnover because it's expensive to recruit, train, and lose.
Thank you. Caprice, same question. What would you want to see in the superintendent's budget to address equity and ensure all children receive an equitable education?
I would like to see that our school district really look at what really our needs and what our wants are. Oftentimes, our schools, as Carl mentioned, they have a high turnover rate, but that's not based on things that our school district wants to do. That's based on state statute. That's based on the model that's coming down from the Florida Department of Education. So again, having somebody that knows which policies relates to which board is very important. Something else that I would like to see is that our school board allow our principals to navigate what their schools need. I listen to our workshops and people are just lying. They are not telling the truth regarding what's really going on in our schools. And again, looking back at what our needs versus our wants are, this is how we can ensure that we have equitable education.
Thank you. Same question, Corey.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we have to begin breaking down the barriers to success. One of the things that limits student success is access. And so we have to make sure that we are equipping every student, not just some students in the district, but every student with take-home technology. And distance learning, because of COVID-19, has spurred this initiative. And so I commend the district on the initiative they've taken with giving 42,000 laptops out to elementary school kids. But what about those middle and high schoolers? We have CARES Act funds there. So we need to make sure that we have someone on that school board who knows how to build relationships and knows how to lobby. Someone who knows how to work with our county commissioners as well as our state legislatures. Someone who knows and who is familiar with the budgeting process. I haven't just sat in on those budget workshops, but I've actually been engaged with our school board members. They're familiar with my track record. They know that I've been present, not just at election time, but all throughout the school year. That's why I've been endorsed by 3 sitting school board members, because they recognize that we need someone who's actually not just going to talk about bridging the gap, but someone who's going to be out there in the community getting the work done. And that's what I've been doing.
Thank you. Caprice, you'll be up next. According to the latest FSA data, 72% of our 3rd grade students were not proficient in reading. We know reading is the foundation of a strong formative education. What is your vision for reading instruction in this district, and how do you plan to accomplish it?
Our district has some of the most passionate teachers and coaches. What we should be continuing to do is standards-based learning, but incorporate more fun, incorporate more diversity. I would also like to see that we include fun activities. There's definitely a way to get back to making education fun. And when we are addressing the needs of the whole child, having student-centered learning, we're going to have more happy and well-developed children. We're going to have better relationships with our students. And then learning will truly be able to occur. But what I would like to address before my time is up is my opponent said he's endorsed by 3 school board members. I would like for you all to try and fact check that.
Thank you. Carl, you're next on that question, and I will read it again. According to the latest FSA data, according to the latest FSA data, 72% of our 3rd grade students were not proficient in reading. We know reading is the foundation of a strong formative education. What is your vision for reading instruction in this district, and how do you plan to accomplish it?
Well, frankly, one of the jobs is having the megaphone. We really need to get the hospitals where children are born at the table, the preschools, the Juvenile Welfare Board, Early Learning Coalition, the city, and the school board together to make sure that our time between birth and the time they come to kindergarten is much better served. We have many children who arrive at kindergarten clearly effectively a year behind, and so that's where it starts. I saw the progress at Melrose significantly impacted by the improvement at Happy Workers, which is the largest preschool that fed Melrose, when they were able to raise teacher salaries there and do a whole series of other things. The kids who came out of that preschool were much closer to being ready.
Thank you. And Corey, same question. Would you like me to reread it?
No, ma'am, I got it. And again, I want to focus on the issues. You know, this race, we're running to represent kids, not behave like kids. So I want to focus on the kids. That's why this is a student-centered campaign. And I believe that the formative years are the periods between the ages of 0 to 7. And those are the most important years because that's when rapid cognitive development occurs. Intellectual learning is important. We have to make sure that we're giving our students the social skills and the emotional wraparound services that they need. And this is why I want to make sure that we fund mental health counselors in our schools. You know, we're living through some traumatic times right now. COVID-19, it's not only stressing you and I out, but it's stressing our children out and our grandchildren. So we need to make sure that we are there with them and working with our partners in the community, whether it's JWB, ELC, Happy Workers Daycare, or Starling Daycare. We need to make sure that we are supporting not just our students, but their families. You know, you talked about the 26% of students that are reading below grade level and not at proficiency, but what about the 36% of students who aren't performing at grade level in math? You know, that's a huge deficit, and we have to think about that. When we are not reaching our parents where they are, we're doing our students a disservice.
Thank you. And Corey, you'll be first on this next question. What experience do you have to be a change agent for Pinellas County Schools, given the discussions in the United States about racial equity, racism, and the likely economic impact of COVID?
Thank you. You know, when people ask me why I'm running for school board, I tell them because I want to be a catalyst for change. I want to be the one to really make sure that we change the culture of corrupt politics. And I'm running against some politicians who've been there all along and haven't done a thing about it, and some retreads, you know, just people with different names, not necessarily the same person. So we need to make sure that we have someone who's unbought and unbossed. I am an independent thinker. And the only person whose interests I'll be representing is yours as my constituent, the students and the teachers of Pinellas County Schools. So that's what I'll do is I'll make sure that I remain autonomous and that I allow our schools to have some autonomy. You know, the reason that teachers can't teach and principals can't lead is because they're being inundated with the minutia that the district is pressing down on them and then the state is putting down their throats. So we got to make sure that we have someone who's going to stand up toe to toe, look you square in the eyes and say, hey, I came here to serve the students, not my own interests, but to serve our students. And that's what I'll keep it, student-centered.
Thank you. Caprice, what experience do you have to be a change agent for Pinellas County Schools, given the discussion in the United States about racial equity, racism, and the likely economic impact of COVID?
As a parent, educator, and actively involved community member, I've been working currently with FEA through the Teacher Program Policy Committee to navigate the reopening of our schools. FEA did put out a statement of reopening suggestions, and some of those have been considered by the FDOE. What I've been doing as a representative on the County Council PTA is meeting in our community. I've been working with organizations outside. This is volunteering with organizations outside of the school district to support our families, to support our children. And my consistent track record shows my commitment. And when we talk about who knows what, it's very important that we know people with the best heart often sound very convincing, but I've been doing the work and I know how to make gains in our learners. I know how to support our parents and I know how to support our teachers. I'm currently doing the work.
Thank you. Carl, your last up for that question. What experience do you have to be a change agent for Pinellas County Schools, given the discussions in the United States about racial equity, racism, and the likely economic impact of COVID?
Candidly, I've been a change agent at every volunteer or civic issue that I've been involved in for 40 years. It's never easy. You know, the inertia is your most powerful enemy. Generally people are afraid of change. But you know, I found on the city council that I was able to bring dozens of changes. Now, most of them, in hindsight, people will say, oh my gosh, we weren't doing that. I mean, community gardens were illegal. Yes, they were illegal. You know, putting a bike on the front of a bus you had to get a permit for that. Yes, you did. I mean, so some of these things look Park and Melrose, there were no, and so I have found that I have been able to bring endless, usually incremental change. Occasionally, you get to make a big change, like creating the CRA, which over the life of that will certainly generate more than $100 million to be invested in the community.
Okay, thank you for that, Carl. You are first up on this next question. Pinellas County Schools has 18 schools on the state's list of persistently low-performing schools. Describe the achievement gap in this district. What can you do as a school board member to influence change in the district?
It sort of comes back to what I just described before. Majority of the worst performing schools in the county are in the district. And people think it's frankly just on the south side of St. Pete. I'm sorry to say that's not the case. You know, one of the schools is in Lellman, one of them is in Gulfport, one of them is in the west side of St. Pete. This is really all about, are we willing to invest sufficient resources in the schools, and to use another figure, the 19 elementary schools that have at least 50% of their kids living in poverty. If we are unwilling to invest sufficient resources in those to close those gaps, this will just continue. And so that requires somebody who can convince other school board members to invest, and then eventually get the legislature to get on the same side of the table, which is one of the serious problems we have.
Corey, you're up for this question. Describe the achievement gap and what you would do as a school board member to influence change.
Thank you. Well, currently, as it stands, the achievement gap in Pinellas County schools is roughly between 15 to 20%. The goal is to graduate at least 100% of our students. However, we're only graduating about 80% of those students. And we need to make sure that those students who are African American and Hispanic have relative instruction. And that means making sure that we are hiring world-class educators to teach our students who can relate to our students. People who come from the same walk of life and background, who share the same lived experience, because relationships matter. Students need to make sure that they can connect with their instructors. And then lastly, we need to make sure that we're training our teachers properly and paying them what they're worth. I mean, pay them their value. We're not making we go above and beyond to make sure that we're paying these people in the administrative top heavy positions. They're high dollar. But what about our teachers? The ones who are actually putting in the grunt work and making sure that our students are reaching academic excellence. I want to make sure that we implement policies that protect and not discriminate against Black and brown students.
Thank you. And Caprice, same question. Do you need me to repeat it?
Yes, please. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I can. Pinellas County Public Schools has 18 schools on the state's list of persistently low-performing schools. Describe the achievement gap in this district. What can you do as a school board member to influence change in this district?
Thank you. My opponents have touched on what we can do to bridge or close the achievement gap. But again, my plan calls for us to look a little deeper. We know that we need additional funding for our schools. We know that we need family engagement and community partnerships to bridge the gaps that we can't fill as a school board. Because again, you have to know what the board is responsible for, what our legislators are responsible for, and what our governor or commissioner of education is responsible for. And that's how everything trickles down. So again, having family engagement and community partnerships, having teacher and educational support professionals at the table when it comes to discussions regarding education. I think about this reopening plan. Again, we should have more educators and support professionals at the table with this one, as well as ensuring that we have everybody involved.
Thank you. Caprice, you're up for our last question before closing statements. What is your vision for education for the community you hope to serve, and how do you expect to be held accountable for moving the district toward that vision?
My vision for District 7 is a vision of equity in education, ensuring that we are addressing the needs of the whole child, making sure that we are providing equitable funding and resources, making sure that our teachers and support professionals are engaged and feel valued, as well as establishing family and community partnerships that last longer than ever. We have the ability to do that here. And I've seen that from the work that I'm currently doing at Fairmont Park Elementary, what I'm doing on as a member of several PTAs and organizations right here in our community. We can help our children and families in places that the school board is unable to. And again, we have to know which board is responsible for which policy. And again, I look forward to sharing that information with you. And working with our legislators, I'm currently working with our legislators, and I'll continue to work with our legislators.
Thank you so much for that. Carl, same question. What is your vision, and how do you expect to be held accountable for moving the district toward that vision?
My vision is really working at two ends of the spectrum. One from the time the kids are born till the third grade, if we close that gap, and then at the other end, we do a terrible job, in my opinion, in connecting the 2/3 of the students who are not going to get a college degree with a path to a middle-class living. 50 years ago, you could earn a middle-class living with a high school education. Today, you cannot. And so we need to make sure that we connect the vast majority of the students with whether it's apprenticeship opportunities, certifications, 2-year programs. There's a wide spectrum, but we really don't connect these children with this. And as a result, many of them graduate from high school and then never really get on the path to a middle-class job. So some of the teaching we can do while they're still in high school. Some we can connect them so that when they leave high school, they immediately.
Okay, and Corey, the question goes to you.
You know, the reason we've been able to amass so much support in our campaign is because people believe in our vision for our public schools. People believe that we don't need another politician. We need a public servant, someone who can connect with us, someone who's a part of us, someone who doesn't just show up for your vote, but someone who shows up when they need you and when you need them. Listen, I believe in a school district that works for all, not just some. Doesn't matter if you're Black or white. I have a scripture on my wall in my office at work, and it says Psalms 133. It says, "Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity." This campaign is taking a unified approach to making sure that we increase the graduation rate to 100% and decrease the dropout rate and the suspension rate to 0%, making sure that we decrease our teacher turnover rate and increase funding for all of our public schools and not just some. I believe that it takes a village to raise a child, and I've had some great people who have been a part of my village, and I appreciate those people who have poured into me. Now I'm ready to pour into that next generation because we need strong role models, especially strong male role models who our students can look up to.
Thank you for that. We will now move into our closing statements. Remember, you will have 2 minutes for your closing statements, and we will begin with Caprice.
As the most qualified candidate to represent School Board District 7, to represent you all as a school board member, District 7, I am a parent, child advocate, actively involved community member, and educator. My endorsements really solidify the diverse experience and expertise that I'm going to bring to the board, from being endorsed by our teachers union, the police union, as well as our council members and past school board members, such as Linda Lerner, Terry Krasner, Andy Oliver, Leah Veal, Denise Ford, Jennifer Webb, Representative Jennifer Webb, and so much more. What I'm looking forward to bringing to the board is this coalition that I have. These people that are going to hold me accountable. These people that know that we need equity in education. And I am the only candidate currently doing the work and with the experience to continue doing the work. I have the passion because this is personal. My children, our community, and our future are dependent on us to get this right. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Corey.
You know, my website is corygivens.com, and there you can find out who's endorsed me, who's supporting me, who's in my corner, and where I stand on the issues. I don't need to go down the list because you're not voting for them, you're voting for me. And my name is on the ballot, Corey Givens Jr. And when you go and when you sit down, whether you open up your ballot because you vote by mail at home or you go to the polls, I want you to ask yourself this question: are we better off than we were 4 years ago? Are we better off than we were 8 years ago? Have things changed? Are our schools stronger and safer? Are our teachers being paid what they deserve? The answer to those questions is no. So why would you vote for someone who has been there all along and gotten us in this mess and think that they're going to get you out of it? We need new ideas. We need new solutions. We need new thinking, and we need new blood. My name is Corey Givens Jr., and I bring a fresh perspective. I'm unbought and I'm unbossed. I don't work for anyone but you. When I get to Largo, it won't be my voice echoing through those halls, but it'll be yours. The values that we share is why I'm here, because I don't see a candidate who speaks to those values. I don't see a candidate who's going to advocate for us because I haven't seen them. We need to make sure that we have a candidate who believes in our students. This is a student-centered campaign, and I want to bring it back to being about the students, because it's about the students and not the politics for me. Yes, it is personal. It's personal when you don't see a reflection of yourself in classrooms across the district. It's personal when you see 5-year-old students being put in handcuffs at a Pinellas County school. It's personal when your teachers are walking out of the schools because they don't feel safe. It's personal, all right. And so if this is personal for you, I ask that you vote for the candidate that shares your values and vote for the candidate that shares your vision for our public schools. And if you care about your students, I ask that you vote for me, Corey Givens Jr. Join me online at corygivens.com. This isn't a campaign, but this is a movement, and we're working together to unite Pinellas County. Thank you, and I look forward to earning your vote.
Thank you. And last but not least, Carl, your closing statements, please.
I will say that we are candidly in a crisis. The COVID crisis, it really has turned everything upside down. And we really need to bring people to the table that that on the first day can contribute. I have 35 years of experience with budgets. I have 10 years on the city council during tough times with budgets, where I was able to find money every year to mitigate the impact. I can assure you that it's going to be a bumpy couple of years for budgeting. That's a skill set that I bring to the table. It's one of the reasons why the Tampa Bay Times on Sunday has the endorsement from me, because I have a long track record. I have a track record of change and improving things, and spending the vast majority of my time trying to improve the standard of living and the housing conditions and the public safety and the infrastructure and the schools for the folks who have the least. That's what I will continue to do, and that's why. And frankly, I think you should vote for me. I will acknowledge that there are better public speakers, but I think if you want a workhorse, nobody works harder than Carl Nurse to try to make a difference. So I ask for your imagination and your vote on August 18th or by mail before then. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our candidates and everybody watching for your time. We have a poll that is now posted for you to make your voice heard. The results will be posted on Monday. If you want to see the results live, turn to Morning Tea and Allegations by following Bianca Goolsby. Please look for that link and make sure your voice is heard.